just watched the Scarsdale Halloween Day Parade. Later on, we'll bring you the Ossining High School Orchestra's Fall Pops concert. But first, here's the series finale of Legends of Buckout Road.
A Mother Goose rhyme. The promise of a party. A girl named for a flower. A handwritten letter. These all seem harmless enough. No? Yet for one man, the typically banal ink and quill became a weapon more gruesome than a sword. A weapon which could capture the sickness in his mind and bring to light his medieval tactics. The man in question, he was your everyday murderous, pedophilic, tax laundering, cannibal sadist. His name was Albert Fish, and he lived here on Buckout Road. What words come to mind when you think Westchester County? How about safe, clean, honest, perhaps domestic? It should be reasonable to think that all of these adjectives of our little New York City suburb are true. But as you'll soon learn, things are not always what they seem. Take our friend, the letter here. For me and you, it's a means of correspondence, a way to reach loved ones. For Albert Fish, it carried a dubious postmark. For each child whose blood he drank, Fish would write a letter, like this one, to the victim's grieving parents, detailing his graphic maiming process. He would seal it in an envelope and send it on its way. Fish serves as proof that, in the past, sickness really could fester in the most unlikely of places. But who was Albert Fish? What led him to his lifestyle of death and debauchery? And what legacy did he leave behind on the Hudson Valley? Well, to find out, we must first take a step back in time.
It was long, long ago. The year was 1870. The first skyscrapers were piercing the gray smog left behind by the great Industrial Revolution. On the streets below, New York was beginning to bloat. The large influx of immigrants from across the globe caused the great American melting pot to overflow, spilling into nearby Westchester, where today's story starts.
Our subject, Albert Fish, was born May 19th of that same year. He was brought into the world by a mentally ill father and a newly deceased mother. Before too long, Fish and his 3 older siblings were transported to Alby's orphanage in Ossining. Unfortunately for Fish, things only got worse once he arrived.
Peter Loring, a local semi-professional folklorist, tells us of the verbal abuse Albert endured at the orphanage.
Well, his real name wasn't actually Albert Fish, you know. His real name was Hamilton Howard Fish. He changed his name because the children of the orphanage used to tease him mercilessly, calling him all sorts of things. One that really got under his skin the most was ham and eggs, believe it or not. I mean, I know it's not funny, but I do find it ironic that a future cannibal would change his identity because his nickname was essentially food.
Ironic indeed. But name-calling wasn't the only thing that got under little Albert's skin during his days in Alby's orphanage, whose ruins sit behind me, now covered in degenerate graffiti art. Fish was also whipped, beaten, forced to sleep in his own urine, and on one occasion, cracked over the head with a splintered tree branch.
Psychiatrist Dr. Philip Liberator explains how Fish's time at the orphanage affected his growth and development.
In the case of Albert Fish, it's hard to deny that his troubles weren't indisputably traced back to his childhood. Curious thing about Albert, though, was that the trauma that he endured in the orphanage didn't shut him down. What's the opposite? It seemed to be the thing to keep him alive. I would even go so far as to say it brightened his internal flame, if you will.
Through Albert's adolescence and early adulthood, that flame deep inside him grew brighter. Somewhere within, a beast was being awoken. But on the outside, things appeared to be quite normal. Fish entered into an arranged marriage by which he had 6 children. It was around this same time that he started frequenting a local wax museum. The contorted figures piqued Fish's interest. He began to postulate the ways the human body could be molded, dissected, and mutilated.
A single, a double, a triple. Home run. Baseball, America's pastime. With the right guy at the plate and some good wood in his hands, there are a whole lot of memories to be made for families out in the stands.
Unfortunately, Albert Fish's family were given no such memories.
This is the bat Albert Fish forced his family to use against him in a very different sort of game.
My father had this bat,
Anna Fish, Albert's last living kin.
and he would ask us to come over to him and put our hands behind our back and, choose a number. And then he would try to guess the number. Never got it right. And when he didn't get it right, he would have us beat him on the back that number of times with the bat. I guess we never really thought much of it at the time. It was just a game we played in our house, like we thought everybody else played with their father. We didn't talk about it. No, we didn't talk about any of it.
But where did this madness come from? Surely it didn't just appear overnight. Our friend Dr. Liberator explains.
I wouldn't call anybody mad unless they were angry. But yes, I suppose Albert Fish was a very angry man. I have to believe that his problems were inherited from his parents and his parents before them. And if this were the case, which it most likely was, I would have to say that these things could have been passed on to his children.
He was strange. He did strange things. But the fact of the matter is that he was my father. And for the majority of time that he was my father, he wasn't hurting anyone, least of all us. Fathers are different inside the 4 walls of their house than they are to the outside world. My father heard voices. Sometimes that happens. When the prophets heard the voice of God, we thought that they were royalty, right? Sometimes I wonder, what's the difference?
Well, for starters, those prophets didn't eat children. These voices Fish heard surely weren't from God, at least not the God in heaven. When Fish's wife left him in 1917, these voices grew louder and louder, and as their volume grew, so did their danger and their perversion. The fragile shell around Albert Fish's savage mind was coming close to cracking. It was 1919 when Albert Fish ate a child for the first time. His cooking technique, meal preparation, and dining etiquette are all lost to old Father Time. What we do know is that his unconventional methods earned him a rather sardonic moniker.
Well, these letters that he would write, each one had a different signature of a strange name. Names like the Moon Guy, the Brooklyn Vampire, Gray Boy. But the first letter he wrote, though, had a name with a bit more resonance. After detailing the way he consumed the 6-year-old boy, Fish signed the first letter as the Boogeyman. Now, he would try many other nicknames, but that one always stuck.
Though he never hurt his own kin, Fish is thought to have killed 50 children, claiming to have a child in each state. While this is, of course, foolish to believe, it is known that Fish ate 3 children at his cottage on Buckout Road, as confirmed by the letters he wrote to the victims' parents.
What I find so intriguing about Albert Fish is that he's an attempt at self-mythologized folklore. Folklore is created by those who experience some sort of trauma and used to diffuse its effects. By retelling the tale, passing it down to the next generation, those affected can slowly distill the horror from the source. Now, with these letters, Fish was attempting to create lore around himself with much effort. Yet, it seemed to have a negating effect. Today, the average person wouldn't know a thing about Albert Fish.
But what was it that brought the boogeyman out of the shadows, and what was it that caused his ultimate demise? Well, it starts with a 9-year-old girl named Gracie Astor, and it ends with something that might ring a bell. The handwritten letter. It's now 1928. Albert, on the prowl for his next meal, put an ad in the local paper looking for a man, young, fit, and willing to work hard. 18-year-old Edward Astor responded within a week and soon received a visit from Albert. Upon his arrival at the Astor's humble abode, Albert spotted Edward's little sister Gracie, and his menu quickly changed. Albert asked little Gracie, "Would you like to go to a party?" And, like any other little girl, Gracie said yes. Albert promised he would return the girl before sundown, but the Astors soon realized they were not dealing with a man of his word. Albert stole Gracie away and drove to a cottage on Buckout. Gracie waited outside as Albert climbed to the top level of the cottage. Fish, stripped down naked, called for the clueless girl and hid in a wooden wardrobe like an old pair of shoes. Gracie climbed to the top level of the cottage, safe for the very last time. Fish leapt from the wardrobe, screaming and brandishing rust-covered torture devices. Albert Fish ate Gracie Astor over the course of 9 days.
Fish's crime was nearly complete, but for some reason still unknown, when it came time to send the letter to the Astor family describing his murder, Fish signed it with his own name. This, of course, is just a copy. The real letter is thought to be as lost as Fish's mind. So why did Fish sign the letter with his own name? Was he tired of not getting credit for his work? Was the lifestyle beginning to bore Albert? Perhaps he made an honest mistake. The truth is, we may never know. What we are certain of is that Fish was brought down by the mighty hand of the law. The moral arc of justice always bends towards the execution of a guilty man. The police were able to trace the letter back to its origin, and Hamilton Howard Fish was shocked to death at Sing Sing prison in 1936, never to hurt a soul again.
Thought the story was over? So did we. But days before this broadcast was set to air, we finally heard back from the niece and nephew of Albert's final victim, Gracie Astor. Now, because of our time frame, this final bit is not quite as polished as the rest of the episode, but we thought it would be a necessary addition. So, let's take a look.
All right. Hello, my name is Judy Astor.
Harold Astor.
Did your father ever talk about Auntie Gracie?
On the rare occasion he would talk about Grace, a holiday, a particularly stormy night, but really no, not until we were older.
How did you learn about her?
How we found out about Aunt Grace? Well, there used to be this nasty little song children would sing about a girl and a house on a street called Buckout. Harold and I, of course, didn't know what they were really talking about, so we would sing along. Now, one time we made the mistake of singing it in front of our father. Well, that was that. You wouldn't believe how red he got that day. He was mad. He was very angry. Mother did all she could to cool him off, and when she finally did, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Where was I?
Your father and the song.
Oh, right. When Mother finally put his tantrum to an end, that's when he sat us down and told us he had a sister, Grace.
What did he say about her?
Well, not very much. He was very protective of us. We were locked in our rooms at night. We couldn't go to friends' birthday parties. We couldn't walk to school on our own. If it weren't for our mother, I don't think he would have wanted to bring children into the world.
Because of what happened with Auntie Grayson.
I believe so. My guess is he would want to take the Astor name to the grave with him. Suppose Harold and I will do that for him now.
So you'd say that Albert Fish had a fairly large
Albert
impact.
Fish.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
Albert Fish.
I'm sorry.
Albert Fish.
I have to take Harold
Albert
away from the
Fish.
sunlight now.
Albert Fish. Albert Fish. Albert Fish. Albert Fish. Albert Fish. Albert Fish.
Should we depart?
I think I have something that may interest you before you leave about all of this. Killed Albert years ago, as you know. Father always wanted us to have a part of him. These were his. One more thing. Dear Mrs. Astor, on June 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street and brought pot cheese and strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. That's when I made up my mind to eat her. On the pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in the closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and said she would tell her mama how she did kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take the meat to my room, cook, and eat it. How sweet and tender her little fingers were roasted in the oven. It took 9 days to eat her entire body. She died a virgin. Signed, Albert Fish.
You just watched the series finale of Legends of Buckout Road. Later on, we'll bring you Rye Brook's Town Hall meeting from October 28th. But first, here's the Ossining High School Orchestra's Fall Pops concert.
Wolf of Westeria, in your heart nary a glimmer of light, uncorrupted and spoiled. What in your mind must compel you to find such unparalleled pleasure in innocence soiled? Into the woods, disguised by trees, disguised as a friend, always cloaked like the coward you are. Tear apart, feeding a sickness that grows as you go down Buckout Road.